All right, here we go. As promised, trying to predict how the Central Division is going to play out here in the 23-24 NHL season. This is the first time I'm taking a crack, at least on video anyway, at predicting how a division outside the Pacific will play out. So we'll see how that goes. But at least with the Central, I don't think there are any, at least terribly obvious places that big surprises could come from. They are clearly teams that are not going to be near the playoffs, some that maybe with a great season can make a run, and then a few teams that are pretty clearly going to be playoff hopeful going into this season. So we may as well get right to it, and just like I did with the Pacific, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And with the 8th place spot here in the Central, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to just about anyone. I'm not going off the board here by any means. This team is going to be pretty much consensus 8th or maybe 7th place in this division, that being the Arizona Coyotes. Now, the Coyotes should be at least somewhat improved from last season. They did make a number of additions and continue to be a team that is probably the team most of any in the NHL that is one where you look at it and go, oh, that's where that guy ended up. As they added players like Alexander Kerfoot, Travis Dermott, Matt Dumba, Jason Zucker, the list goes on. Still, no terribly big adds and nothing that's really going to move the needle in a way to get this team anywhere near the playoff hunt. Still, watching Logan Cooley play will probably be enough to keep fans coming to, well, a few thousand fans coming to games in Arizona, which is about as much as that building will hold. But at least it's a team that should be a little bit more fun to watch than they were this last season, even if they don't do a ton of winning. And actually, speaking of Cooley, I would say that he has a pretty good chance to win the Calder this season, maybe even an inside track at doing so, if it wasn't for the guy that will be drawing all the attention, heck, nationwide, even worldwide as far as hockey fans are concerned, to the team that I have in 7th place, where yes, Conner Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks will likely be residing. Now, that being said, even if Bedard does live up to all the hype and expectations surrounding him in his rookie season, it's still not going to be enough to bring this team anywhere near the playoffs. They weren't a good team last year, and they certainly haven't gotten better in the offseason. No offense to Ryan Donato, who myself and other Kraken fans will probably be at least somewhat interested in seeing how he can do in a different team after reviving his career in Seattle. But other than that, and I guess the addition of Josh Bailey, there really hasn't been anything that this team has added to get any better. And, well, they didn't really lose anything either, I suppose, other than Caleb Jones, which splits up the Jones brothers on defense. But again, like I've already said, the main story here, and the only reason anybody outside of Chicago is going to care about watching this team, is to watch Conner Bedard and whether or not he can live up to expectations that have some people thinking he could even be better than McDavid. Well, not right away by any means, but eventually down the line as his career goes on. Either way, if he gets anywhere near that, and all indications from what he's done so far in camp are that he definitely can, it's going to be a very exciting rookie season from number 98 to watch, regardless of how few wins this team puts up. Then in 6th place, I have the Winnipeg Jets, and yes, I already know that Jets fans will probably be upset about this, and there's a decent chance that I'm underestimating this team. After all, Hellebuck is sticking around, at least for the one more season, but even if he didn't necessarily add to the leadership of the team, Blake Wheeler still was a good enough player on the ice that him leaving isn't going to help them that much. They didn't really make any particularly big additions, and it still seems like there's some turmoil as far as what's going on with this team. Now, yes, they did make the playoffs last year, but only just barely. And again, they have lost more than they've gained in this offseason. Plus, last season, they were definitely helped out quite a bit by the massive breakout season of Josh Morrissey in the defensive end that got him 5th place in the Norris voting. So yes, I will concede that if Morrissey can play more like he did last season and not regress back to what he had been playing like before that, which still wasn't a bad player by any means, but not a Norris caliber defenseman, and Hellebuck can get back to more the Hellebuck that we've known for most of his career, then this team, well, 6th place is far too low from them, and they should be right around that playoff bubble again. But I'm just not terribly convinced that that's all going to happen, and things are going to fall in place for the Jets to make the playoffs again. 6th place is still probably the floor for this team, so maybe 5th is more realistic, but I'll stick with 6th for now. And part of the reason that I am saying 5th place is maybe a little bit more reasonable for the Jets is because the team that I'm going with in 5th place here is the St. Louis Blues, who did not have a terribly good season last year, were sellers at the deadline, And then, while some of their fans may have been hoping that guys like Ryan O'Reilly might come back in free agency, he went to Nashville, a division rival, instead of coming back. Tarasenko's also not coming back. So, yeah, this team really doesn't look like they're going to be very good. Maybe not terrible, but somewhere in that mediocre, outside the playoffs type of area that, yeah, honestly, 6th place would probably be a better spot for them. But we'll say 5th for now, and definitely not looking like a team that's playoff bound. And of course, as always in St. Louis, there are going to be a lot of eyes on Binnington and seeing whether or not, well, for one, he can keep his head on his shoulders on a regular basis, but also play up to the $6 million contract that they're paying him for the next 4 seasons. And if not, what they can potentially do to get out from under that contract, as I don't think the Blues want to be going into a full rebuild and are just looking for a couple-year retool to get back into that playoff hunt, which, again, I don't really think is in the cards this season. Then in 4th place, I have the Nashville Predators, who, as I just mentioned, did add old Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly in the offseason, as well as his, at least playoff teammate in Toronto in Luke Schenn. Even with those additions, though, as well as the fact that their biggest loss was either Rasmus Asplund or Cal Foote, this is still a team that I think is looking at a wild card at best, and probably in the end competing with either Calgary or Seattle, whichever one finishes 5th in the Pacific for that second wild card spot in the West. Now, that being said, this is still a team that, at the time I'm recording this, has a fair amount of cap space left and a lot of guys on expiring contracts after this season, so they could be a pretty interesting team to watch come the trade deadline, depending on where they're at in the standings, whether they decide to become sellers or buyers and make more of a push to maybe work their way up the standings and get a little bit more safer in a wild card spot. Either way, I don't really see them working their way into the top 3 of this division, unless the team I have in 3rd just falls apart. And while I don't necessarily think that's terribly likely, it is not out of the realm of possibility, because in 3rd place, I have a team that definitely does not have a lot of cap space in the Minnesota Wild, who did make the postseason last year without too much trouble, even with the first year of those payouts for the Parise and Suter buyouts, and are still missing about $14 million of cap space to those. But with Matt Boldy locked up for a long time and still Kaprizov making highlights constantly, this is a team that shouldn't have too much trouble given the mediocrity of this division in claiming one of those top 3 spots. But they definitely do have their fair share of vulnerabilities, especially that blue line that isn't terribly deep, especially now that Dumba, and even, I guess he didn't help that much last season as he was a trade deadline pickup in John Klingberg, but they didn't really add much to bring back on that blue line. And aside from that top end on the forward end, there's not a lot of depth there, and there's no reinforcements coming with the cap trouble they have. So as much, if not even more so than just about any other team in the NHL, their top guys are going to have to play like it and stay healthy if they want to go where they think and hope they can and get to that postseason spot and hopefully actually win around this time. At least for now, we're not going to count on injuries or anything like that, so the roster as it is definitely good enough for 3rd in this division. And finally, just like with the Pacific Division, at least to me anyway, the top 2 teams in the Central are pretty clearly the top 2 teams going into the season. Now, obviously it's the NHL and anything can happen, as we've seen just about every year, but based off of expectations going into the season, I'd be somewhat surprised if too many people have anyone other than these 2 at 1 and 2 in some order. And I'm going to start with the Dallas Stars here in 2nd place, who are coming fresh off of that conference finals appearance. So this is a very good hockey team, and they really didn't lose much from that team. Colin Miller on the defensive end is their biggest loss, I would say. They still got a good young goaltender in Ottinger, even if he didn't have a bit of an off and on postseason for him. Still, it's a good defensive core and a team that can really lock it down or can turn it on offensively when they want to. And made the addition, of course, of Matt Duchene, as well as depth with Derek Pouliot and Kraken expansion draft legend Gavin Bayreuther. There's your Kraken deep cut. Basically, for the Stars, who finished last season 7th in goals per game and 3rd in goals against per game, both best in the Central Division, as long as they can stay healthy, which I understand is something you could say about just about any team in the NHL, but especially one like the Stars, who still have a pretty important veteran core that is getting towards the end of their careers and starting to show some of those injury tendencies, even with the younger core getting more and more experienced. They need those older guys to be healthy and going for them if they want to get to where they're going. As long as that happens, though, this is a team that should have no trouble finishing at least second in this division and really giving the, obviously by process of elimination, Avalanche a run for their money for that first spot in the division. But yes, even with the first round exit last season and McKinnon making now about twice as much money as he was before, I still have the Colorado Avalanche as the favorites to win the Central Division. They still have the two best players in this division. Again, Stars fans might have something to say about that with Jason Robertson and Miro Heiskanen, but with McKinnon and Makar, this is still a team, especially with the depth of talent behind them. Obviously, Nichushkin's situation will still be one that's could play in here a little bit and very strange to this day. Either way, though, with or without Nichushkin, this is still a team that's going to be one of the favorites to go all the way out of the West this season, and rightfully so. That having been said, let me know what you think down in the comment section, what your Central standings would be going into this season, what I obviously got right, what I got wrong. Yeah, just your general thoughts. As always with the NHL, what we think and what actually happens almost always are different in big ways, so we'll see at the end of the season and be accountable next season to how this Central Division prediction went. Since it's the first time I'm doing a Central Division prediction, and I did actually do them last year, I just didn't make a video about it. I didn't get around to that video. I couldn't find those predictions anywhere though, so no accountability for last year, but I'll have that next season. Until then, though, if you haven't made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below to help support the channel. If you'd really like to help support the channel, there's also a Patreon down there, especially for those of you that are around for the R&Rs after Kraken games. A lot of good rewards there. And that having been said, till next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken, even if they weren't really a part of this video.